Total War Warhammer 3 will play host to two human factions, the lands of Grand Cathay and the frozen empire of Kislev. But on the other end of the line, we will have access to all four of the ruinous powers, a faction for Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and Nurgle respectively, each one manned by what we assume will be a prominent greater demon. Earlier this year, we already saw Kislev and Khorne square off in a battle in the realm of chaos at the Brass Citadel, the capital, as it were, of Khorne's realm. Through this marketing preview, we were given a glimpse into a new game mode that will be present within Total War Warhammer 3 and marks particularly important parts of the story. With Creative Assembly's announcement that this last July, we now know that we won't be getting news until September. But we know that when we do, we'll finally hear about the enigmatic Grand Cathay and the Great Bastion wall that protects its northern border. We just did a video on the lore for the Bastion, which you can find linked in the upper right corner. But what is exciting about this is that it will also be a preview of the new siege mechanics coming with Warhammer 3, a hotly requested and anticipated feature since Game 1's launch back in 2016. But who will be attacking the Great Bastion? Who will seek to tear down the half-mile high walls of Cathay's most prominent landmark and defense? In this video today, we'll be discussing how I feel that Tzeentch will be the faction shown to us alongside Cathay to act as the antagonist, as it were, of that marketing reveal. We'll be going over some small excerpts from the lore, showing how Tzeentch is probably one of the largest forces outside of the Chaos Marauders in the north that constantly act against Cathay, either in subterfuge or in outright hostility. I think that this makes a lot of sense, too, to get another faction on the table to show off and give us glimpses of. It could also just simply, be Khorne, but thematically, Tzeentch would make a lot of sense. But if you have not yet pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 3, you can use the link in my description to my Nexus Store. This will preserve the pre-order discount. You'll get a Steam key directly from the developer, and it's a great way to support the channel. Outside of that, you can support me using the links to my Patreon or to Sneak Energy in the pinned comment. Use creator code SPARTY at checkout to help out. Now let's get started on my Cathay versus Tzeentch as the next marketing reveal for Total War Warhammer 3. So to start off out, we have to talk about the lore connection between Tzeentch and Cathay. And this is linked a lot of different ways, right? We get an entry in the 7th edition Warriors of Chaos book where it has a general timeline of things that kind of go on in different chaos invasions here and there and in conflicts. And one of them mentions how the cult of Chi, known to the mortals of the old world as Tzeentch, gains favor amongst the aristocracy in far Cathay. And this starts to become a really big a pattern, I guess you could say, and it's something that we see in RPGs and everything of the sort. The cult of the Purple Hand, for example, is one of the strongest Tzeentchian cults in the world, and it has its basis in Cathay. Though the Purple Hand is by far the most widespread and ambitious of Tzeentch's cults, the gods' whisperers are legion. They take every shape and size and are present throughout the strata of society in the old world and beyond. Each cult is guided through the example of their magus, spiritual stand-in for Tzeentch and guardian of the cult's lore. And this goes off to talk about how far Cathay Magi take the form of courtiers and concubines. And that becomes a bit of a repeating motif when it comes to Tzeentch and Cathay. This isn't the outright subterfuge and implantation of these cults that then rise up and take over everything. It's not quite like that. It's a little bit more subtle. It's done through, again, courtiers and courtesans, as it mentions, and individuals that become high up in the aristocracy that go to influence some of the leaders of Cathay, not just simply the dragon emperors, but a lot of the other prominent head of household. So this is something that is talked about even as early back as like the 1st edition of Warhammer Fantasy RPG. We have a lot of characters that this kind of threads their way through everything. Even in the Genevieve series with Dian Qing, we get a lot of discussion about how the individual serves Lord Xianxin, which is basically the Cathayan version of Tzeentch. It's what their word for it is, the Lord Xianxin. And how Dian Qing is acting as a representative of the Monkey King, and he's trying to help further these relations, but actually he is an agent of chaos, an agent of Tzeentch, and he's killed the actual representative and replaced him. So there's all these dealings with the upper echelons of Cathay and with Tzeentch. And we see this not just in the current timeline, I guess you could say, of Cathay, but it is something that is stretched back far beyond. Because the Monkey King is not the current king, obviously, of Cathay. And we get this presence of Dian Qing in the time of the Monkey King, which is a little bit past to this current era. And what I think is really interesting about this, and what I think it kind of acts as a very stark contrast to what we have seen in the past, especially when you compare it to Khorne, right? Who's just slamming his head into everything and taking skulls. This is more subtle. And I think that this might possibly, if they did actual Tzeentch, it'd be cool to see this eke into the actual Siege rework. I expect there to be tons of things for the Siege rework, and I'm probably going to do a separate video on that, discussing exclusively, hey, here's some things that I'd love to see for a Siege rework. But if we're talking about the kind of skullduggery and subterfuge of these Tzeentchian cults, I would really love to see that implemented into Total War Warhammer as a possible way to influence a siege prior to you even getting onto the battle map. And we've seen this with previous Total Wars, right? Remember how the spy would go in there and had a chance for you to open the gates so that when you actually jump into the siege map, you'd have gates that were open to you that you could just run into. I would love to see something like this. Hey, you know, we have a cult of Tzeentch that is present over here in Grand Cathay, and you could even blast this out to, hey, this is present for the Special Pirate Coves of the Vampire Coast, or hey, this is something from the Skaven not underlayers, but you get my point here. Trying to expand this mechanic out to make sieges have a bit of a campaign mechanic that then then just kind of transfers into the actual battle mechanics of it, and having maybe this Tzeentchian cult influence that, hey, well, all towers are not going to be doing as much damage because there's a Tzeentchian cult that's infiltrated, and maybe they've done something to influence the people that are on the towers, so all towers do 50% less damage. Or again, just simply going off of previous Total Wars, they have the gates open for you. Or there's this huge explosion of wild Tzeentchian magic, and it actually opens up a huge crack in the walls, and you can just run through that opening. I would love to see this show off from Creative Assembly, include some of the aspects of what makes Tzeentch Tzeentch. Right? It's all about that changer of ways, the guy pulling the strings from behind. You are part of a scheme within a scheme within a scheme. It's not just simply like, a wall, let's go break that down. If that was the case, I would have loved to have seen that from Khorne. And it's cool too to see this kind of juxtaposition, comparing this to the previous marketing reveal. If we look at the previous marketing reveal, we saw Kislev, a terrestrial, a mortal realm-based empire, attacking into the Chaos Realm. We see them attacking the Brass Citadel. Well, the juxtaposition here would obviously be that Tzeentch, a demon faction, is pouring out of the demon realm and is attacking the Great Bastion wall. So it will be very interesting to see how that's done. Will it be done in a multiple tier engagement style system that we saw with the Brass Citadel, where, hey, you're going to go through these 3 tiers of location, and that's going to equal this, that, and this. I personally would not like to see that as much as, hey, this is a siege with a lot of situations going on. Like, hey, you can do a sortie out into the actual field and have a field battle, and that's what this would look like, and this is how that would actually influence the siege when that siege goes on. Stuff like that. And I think that, again, having Tzeentch as a part of this could be a really fun way to change the dynamic. And when we talk about the subterfuge and all that, that's all good and dandy, right? We get plenty of it. It's chaos, like, just exactly as planned. But there is also some outright aggression we could be getting from Tzeentch as well. If we look into some of the Archaon publications by Rob Sanders, we see a little bit deeper of a direct opposition against Grand Cathay, again by Tzeentch, with Yen Yalong, which is the Flame Fang. It's this massive serpentine dragon that was released upon Grand Cathay. It's called the Scourge of Grand Cathay. It's got all of these awesome monikers that, again, all hint towards Tzeentch and Cathay and having that opposition. But this massive beast that essentially attacks the wall. And there's a really interesting little bit about this here. And it's right after there's a failed attempt to summon Flame Fang. And a demon sorcerer is talking to Archaon and kind of tells him, like, hey, yeah, that was supposed to fail, but I'm really the guy that's going to summon him for you. And it kind of opens up like this. As you were sent with secrets, sorcerer, Archaon said, his voice bouncing ominously about the cave. Incantations, this Flame Fang, the savage spirit of a serpent ancient and long past, the sorcerer told him. A monster of fang and flame that no wall or Great Bastion would resist. The terror of Grand Cathay has afflicted the Eastern Empires for the best part of 1,000 years. Know what you ask, Chaos Warrior. You would have me visit Lord Tzeentch's storm of change upon the world once more? So you again get this very cataclysmic level creature with the Flame Fang coming out and attacking Grand Cathay at the behest of Archaon. And this could be really awesome as a possible right or a possible summonable on the battlefield for sieges for Tzeentch's faction, right? Like, okay, you do enough X, Y, and Z, you now unlock this. Maybe it is a specific, you use a specific amount of resource to unlock it to use it in siege battles, or you build X building and it equals this in siege battles. Whatever the mechanic is, to have that ability to summon this creature and not just simply a fight against the Great Bastion, which would make sense, right? This is supposed to be a huge siege conflict, and it could make sense that this is the only case in which you'd be able to summon something like this, and every faction has some sort of quote-unquote siege breaker unit that they can bring to the battlefield, which could be very cool. But even if we're just talking from a general siege mechanic standpoint when it comes to Tzeentch, I think having access to these abilities to help make sieges a little bit more dynamic and have a little bit more of a trump card on both ends could be very fun and interesting, rather than just simply, here is one side of a wall, hope you guys defend it properly because here comes an army. So plenty of different ways that they can explore this. And this is a lot of baseless speculation, of course. We're looking at some pretty obscure points in the lore, but the point is that almost all the time when it comes to talking about Cathay, you almost always get Tzeentch mentioned in that same breath. If you're not talking about Chaos Marauders, it's going to be Tzeentch when you're talking about opposition against Cathay. So I don't think we're going to hear about Chaos Marauders cracking open the Great Bastion, because the only time that even occurred was after an earthquake, which naturally opened a rent in the Great Bastion, and that was caused by the slime, but that's neither here nor there. So go ahead and let me know in the comment section below what you think about this. Do you think it's going to be Tzeentch and Cathay? And my follow-up to that is, if we got Kislev and Khorne, we got Tzeentch and Cathay next, then we probably would get Slaanesh and Nurgle, which would make a lot of sense too. And it'd be very interesting too to jump us more into the realm of chaos. But at the same time too, that could just simply be, hey, now it's going to be Kislev and Slaanesh and then Nurgle and Cathay. They could do that route, but there are still plenty of things to dive into at Total War Warhammer 3. A lot of mechanics we still haven't unearthed just yet. We've only had the kind of tip of the iceberg, quote unquote, with our initial conversations from the developers, with those initial interviews, and with that initial marketing reveal. So there seems to be plenty more to talk about with Total War Warhammer 3, and I'd love to get your opinion, guys, on what you think is coming with Cathay. Do you think it is going to be another demon faction, or do you think it's going to be something else entirely different? But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Just wanted to kind of quickly jump on this subject because it was something that's been kicking around my brain recently. And with the recent announcement about the news, I think it's only a perfect time to talk about that until the next month. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Thanks for dealing with these allergies as they kind of leave me and I finally come back to normal. But as always, have a good one and take care.